tribe families. Their proportion in the population is only 25%, so they got a very much bigger share of employment than their share in the population. And all this was at the cost of only 0.5% of GDP. So it's not a very expensive program for something that does so much good for so many people. And I'm mentioning 2011-12 because that is the year for which we have at least 2 independent national surveys to corroborate these figures. The National Sample Survey and the second India Human Development Survey. And both surveys show that most of these figures are real, not entirely real. There was some bogus employment, there were some leakages, but relatively limited. Something like 80 to 90% of the wages that had been officially paid were reflected in these household surveys. That, I think, is a big achievement. And in a few states, it was almost fully reflected, 100% matching between the independent surveys and the official statistics. Kerala was one of these, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, and Himachal Pradesh. 7 states that I feel have demonstrated the possibility and sustainability of employment guarantee, not for a short period of time, not in a small pocket, but in large, not countries, but states over a long period of time. And that's why I say this is something that deserves the title of Vishwaguru. So that is what I call the silver age of Narega, not the golden age. There is no golden age. There are always problems, there are always leakages and so on. But I would say the silver age when things were really at their peak. Unfortunately, after that, there has been a setback. I think we have to be honest. The reasons for that are not simple to explain in a short presentation. But one thing that has done enormous harm is the chronic failure of the central government to ensure timely payment of wages. They keep changing the wage system, the wage payment system. It started with cash, then post office, then banks, then some particular banks, then FMS, EFMS, PFMS, whatever, DBT, now we are switching to DBT Sparsh. And every time you put a new system in place, there are so-called teething problems that last for months, sometimes for years. And by the time the teething problems start getting resolved, you move to a new system and new teething problems. So the payments have been very irregular, unreliable, untimely. There are problems of delayed payments, diverted payments, blocked payments, non-payments. And in recent years, many cases of people working without being paid because of this NMS, the National Mobile Monitoring System, which is basically online photo attendance on the work site. So the workers have to, the supervisor has to upload 2 photos online from the work site to ensure that workers are being paid. And often it doesn't happen because of connectivity issues, server going down, supervisors in the mobile, whatever, there may be many reasons. And then workers end up not being paid, and this is absolutely unacceptable. How can you force people to do hard work, in the blazing sun, and then not pay them at all? This is really not acceptable. And because of these payment issues, many workers have started losing interest. In the initial years, they had a lot of interest because the payments were more reliable, and also because the wages were quite high at that time. In the initial years of Narega, the wages being paid under this program were higher than the market wages, and in some places quite a bit higher. So the workers were into it. They were, fighting for their rights. They were monitoring the scheme, opposing these contractors who are trying to exploit them, and so on. Now there's a lot of loss of interest because of these payment issues, and that also opens the door to corruption. Let me give you an example. Suppose you're a worker and you have 2 choices. You can work honestly for a week and earn, let's say, 2,000 rupees, but you don't know when you will be paid, whether you will be paid, whether you can count on it, whether somebody will siphon off your wages. You can take the chance. Or you can forget that and cooperate with a corrupt contractor or middleman who will use your job card and bank account to siphon off funds, fudge the master rolls, and give you a share, maybe 500 rupees. Now you can see that the more uncertain the payment, the more the temptation will be not to work and just to become part of this nexus of corruption. And this is the tragedy that many Narega workers have become co-opted in the nexus of corruption. And that makes corruption very difficult to contain. Because social audits, for example, social audits depend on what, in a social audit, what you do is you take the official records, and then you go to people's houses, or you have a public meeting, and you verify the records in public. But if the workers are part of the nexus of corruption, they may not tell you the truth. And everything, the whole effort breaks down. Then there's the related issue of centralization and technocracy. The program has become more and more centralized. The central government is controlling more and more aspects of the program, which is contrary to the initial idea. The initial idea was that it would be a decentralized program with each state having its own employment guarantee scheme. Now it's highly centralized and highly technical, if not technocratic. You know, all kinds of digital technologies are being imposed, technologies that are not necessarily ready or reliable or appropriate. For example, this Aadhaar-based payment system, which I think is really objectionable because it's simply not reliable. You may notice that when you do a booking online or something, you have all these different payment options, net banking, UPI, this and that. What you don't have, I think, is Aadhaar-based payment. And that's because the NPCI, the National Payment Corporation of India, knows that this system is not ready. It has not been made part of UPI, but for the Naraga workers, it's fine. So they have been struggling with all these problems of payment. Okay, so there has been this setback, and there is a need today, I think, for revival and reform and improvement of the program, if it has to be saved. Definitely, I will be the last person to deny that this program needs to be improved. And also it needs a revival of political commitment. That plays a very big part in this story. If the central government and state governments are committed to this program, then they will go after these corrupt elements. They will punish them. But now we very rarely see that these middlemen are being punished. So there is a need for reform. But this new act that has been brought, replacing Narega is now being repealed. It's still there right now, but the moment the central government invokes Section 37 of BBGRG, it will repeal Narega and then replace it with a centrally sponsored scheme, basically at the discretion of the central government. In this new scheme, everything is controlled by the central government. The central government will decide where and when the employment guarantee applies. It will decide the budget, it will decide the wage rate, it will decide the technology, it will decide the schemes under which you can undertake work, everything. And there are many powers in that act that the central government can use to restrict employment. For example, what we call the switch-off clause, which is the power to denotify particular areas at any time. So the government will decide where and when the employment guarantee comes into force. Which is very strange because it's like saying, I give you an employment guarantee, but I don't guarantee that the guarantee will apply. That's not a proper guarantee. And then there's the new financial framework, which puts a big burden on the state governments, including the poorer states that may not be able to contribute their 40% share. There is the seasonal discontinuation, so there's a provision that says that for 2 months during the peak seasons, the scheme will be discontinued. There's a convergence clause that says that all the work under this program will have to be done according to schemes notified by the central government. So again, the central government will pull the strings. And then there's an imposition of, again, centralized digital technology that could be used, that provision can again be used by the central government to put all kinds of restrictions. So I think the outlook is not very encouraging. The central government probably will try to continue for some time to keep things going more or less as they are. But I think in due course, all these restrictions will make themselves felt. Now, of course, if you trust the competence and the intentions of the central government, then you will not be very worried because the central government can still implement the employment guarantee if it would like to. But I don't personally trust the central government to do this. And in any case, even if you trust the central government, you know, the idea of employment guarantee is not to depend on the government. The idea is to make the state accountable to the workers and for them to be free of any dependence on the intentions of the central government. So So I think we are moving now to a new and very uncertain phase of employment guarantee and to the possibility of a decline, if not dismantling, of the employment guarantee.